Okay, so in this episode, we're going to be focused on moon magic and what that means to you and why you need to know anything about the moon in general. The reason why I am going to start talking about things like this on Unleashed Alchemy is because if you have been around here for a minute, you will see that I have different segments, okay, that I deal with on Unleashed Alchemy. The reason why I have broken out this show into talking about certain things on certain days is because this all goes back to liberating yourself from programmed consciousness, specifically religion. And you'll notice that in these segments, or first of all, the reason why I even broke up the show to have specific segments on different days is because programming, specifically religious programming, it affects every single part of our lives and it affects every single one of those segments that I talk about. So on Thursday, if you're new here, and for those of you that have been here, this will be a review for you. So on Thursday, we talk about money and how program has affected your money. On Friday, we talk about you embracing who you are as a sensual being and a spiritual being. Why? Because religious programming has affected how you connect with your body. And that is important to know because in your body is where your identity lies. In your body is where the truest expression of you, that's where it's felt first. All right. On Tuesdays, we talk about the power of your voice, the power of your words. Why? Because religious programming has has attempted to strip you of the fact that you are a creator and that when you open up your mouth, your breath is as strong as the wind and your words go out and create exactly what you say. So on Tuesday, we focus specifically on activating your throat chakra so it can always be at optimal function. Now, for this new segment that I'm adding to the show, because when you're listening to this, it will be Monday, I am going to be talking specifically to you about your spiritual technology, your spiritual bag, the ways that you can practice your spirituality, specifically with the elements, specifically with nature. So, to start this segment off, it is perfect for us to talk about the full moon. The reason why is because we are at this point, will be at the tail end of this full moon era, okay, of this full moon time for this month. So let's get into today's episode. Now, like I said earlier, moon magic. And you're going to notice me, if you're watching me on YouTube, you already know I have notes. So you're going to see me reading notes, okay? Because this is important, just like all the other episodes. But anyway, let's keep going. So moon magic, what does it mean to you? Why is it important? Because the phrase that we hear and we throw it around, not really understanding what it truly means. The phrase as above, so below. As above, so below. Whatever is happening in the cosmos, it is affecting you because of your connection to the elements. And let me just pause here. Many times I use the phrase spiritual technology, spiritual bag, to drive home the point that as a sovereign being, you came into this world with specific ways for you to celebrate your divinity in this physical world. You came here already with it. So it's not something that you have to go out and find. You have to allow it to be uncovered from within you, and so that you can express it in the external. All right. So if you don't know anything else, and you may be saying, well, I've tried, I've stepped away from church. I detached from religion, but I still don't know how to practice my spirituality. If you don't know anything else, go outside. If you don't know anything else, begin to understand the elements. Begin to understand the power in trees. It is very simple. It is not difficult. All right, start there. So that was a side note. So let me come back to this episode. Now, let's go back to the basics. What is a full moon? All right. A full moon, on a spiritual sense, it illuminates everything that has been hidden. Everything. And when I say everything, a lot of times when we hear, things like, okay, things are being uncovered, things are being exposed, that's not always necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean all bad things are being exposed. It means good things are being exposed as well. All right. So a full moon illuminates what is hidden, what has been hidden, what has been hidden within you, what has been hidden within other people, and what has been hidden in the world, the collective, right? I'll use that phrase, in society. It illuminates and uncovers what has been hidden in society, all right? So it uncovers what's within you. It uncovers what is within other people, a lot of times in your community. And then it uncovers what has been hidden in society, in the collective, all right? Now, what are the things that have been hidden? So it could be emotions that have been hidden, that gets uncovered, those emotions get rushed to the surface during a full moon, all right? It could be intentions that have been hidden, that the full moon is saying, okay, it's time to bring those hidden intentions. It's time to expose those hidden intentions. Your desires. If you have had desires that you have put on the shelf for whatever reason, you've had desires that you put on the shelf because someone told you, or perhaps you told yourself that they were unrealistic, those get illuminated. They become in your face so that you can no longer ignore those desires anymore. The full moon has the energy of, this is what it is. These are your desires. Take action. All right. What are some other things that the full moon brings to the surface? Well, the full moon can bring dreams to the surface. This ties into your desires. It could literally mean your dreams that you've had for the way that you want to live your life. And it could literally mean a dream that you had when you were asleep. A lot of times we dismiss our dreams because they don't make sense, or maybe because we don't even remember them, right? But sometimes many times, all the time, if there is a message in a dream that you need to pay attention to, the time of the full moon will bring that dream back up. All right. Other things that can be brought to the surface that have been hidden is guidance. Well, how does guidance get hidden? Guidance gets hidden, internal guidance gets hidden because we're too busy looking on the outside for that guidance, or we're too busy looking to the outside for validation. That can hide your internal guidance. All right. Being stubborn. All right. Not receiving help. So the full moon time will bring guidance to you. If it's something that you heard in the past and it comes back up to you again, perhaps that is the energy of the full moon saying, hey, I brought this to you before, you ignored it, so here it is again. All right. Also, and this last point that I want to make to this, it ties into guidance. What is often hidden that the full moon will show to you are the next steps that you need to take, which have been hidden by what we would consider to be negative emotions. All right. and I'm going to get into this in a minute, but I want to say this here. Emotions that we consider negative would be, feeling uh, anger, hatred, jealousy, envy, anxiousness. Those are feelings that are unwanted, emotions that are unwanted, but at the same time, those are guideposts. At the same time, those emotions are giving you guidance. Those emotions, we often, because they do feel so uncomfortable, we try to pretend, which is the worst thing that you can do. We try to pretend that they do not exist. And what can happen is that they can build up and build up and build up over time to where everything that you need to do is within you. It's right in your face. But those emotions that you are pretending that aren't there have now found its home in your body. And so now it's blocking your intuition. Now it's blocking your entire chakra system to even receive the next steps. All right. So I wanted to drive that home. Now, let's focus on the emotions that I'm talking about specifically for this episode. So I want to focus on anxiousness, worry, and fear. And I'm going to give you some examples to illustrate this. One example is going to be one that I just experienced, and one is going to be an example that we experience from time to time just through the news, right? So, because the nature of the full moon is to illuminate, and just like we just talked about, and to cause things to rise to the surface, can make emotions like anxiousness, worry, and fear, can make them feel extremely heavy and very, very thick. Okay, thick that you can cut with a knife. All right. So, again, what does this have to do with you? Because you live in a world with other people, you need to remember that you do not have to take on the heaviness of other people. I'm going to repeat that. Because you live in a world with other people, you do not need to take on the heaviness of other people. Now, that may sound very simple, and you may be listening to that saying, okay, wow, big deal. I already know that. But taking on the heaviness of other people is very subtle, and it happens very quickly. So, here's what I want to tell you. As your own emotions are being shown to you, yes, you acknowledge them. Yes, you view those emotions as your guideposts because that's what they are. Emotions aren't to be ignored. Emotions aren't to be shunned away. They're to be accepted. All right. And it's not something, emotions are not something that are presented to you to take over your life or to cause you to spiral. All right. But you're to look at what the emotion is telling you about you. You acknowledge the emotion because in the emotion is raw energy. It's raw energy that you can use to benefit yourself, to benefit your life. This is why this show is called Unleashed Alchemy. All right. So let's move forward. Now, this is where you need to be aware that people around you also have their emotions that are surfacing as well. Now, whether they relate to that, those emotions surfacing, whether they relate that to the cosmic instance of a full moon or not, is irrelevant. It's irrelevant because it affects us all, whether we acknowledge it or not. All right. What is irrelevant for you to know is that it is not your responsibility to take on another person's emotion. I don't care what it's about. So, with these two examples that I'm going to illustrate for you, that's going to illustrate this point, these points that I made, they could cause you to feel uncomfortable because they're a little controversial, because they could sound as if you are being selfish or even cold-hearted. So, let me give you a personal example. So, I had an individual, and I'm talking about family here, all right? And this could be, when we talk about family, I probably should just say community. Community, to anytime you hear me say your community, that could be your family. It could be your friends. It could be people, basically people that are closest to you, people that you have close proximity to, people that you have regular communication with, all right? May not be every day, but you have regular communication to these people. These are the people that you would consider, your loved ones. These are the people that are closest to you in your life, right? Okay. So I had an individual come to me, someone very close to me, and they wanted to discuss a situation that is currently taking place with our mutual loved one. Okay. This person, okay, as we're talking, they are very anxious, they are very worried, and they feel fear. And understandably so, because our mutual loved one is going through a health situation. Okay. And I have said what my contribution is going to be to support our mutual loved one in this health situation, and how I can inspire and how I can be of help to this individual in their recovery, not in their acceptance of this health condition, but in their recovery. And I was explaining to, because the person that brought up the discussion, they wanted to hear my view. Okay, fine, that's fair. And they also wanted to tell me, based on their worry, based on their anxiousness, that I needed to force more, that I needed to force my thoughts on this individual handling their situation, that I needed to force my opinions on this person. And it got to a point where I had to tell this individual, I am not going to take on anyone else's worry or anyone else's anxiousness about our mutual loved one's current condition in the moment. So my point in bringing that up, so let me add some more into. So you have to set a boundary on what you will take in and how much another person's situation is going to affect you. Okay. This does not mean that you love that person any less. It doesn't mean that you don't care. But to be worried and to be anxious and to feel like you have to also meet another person's worry and anxiousness on their level, that does not help a person's Okay, I'm sorry for that interruption. So I'm going to repeat what I just said. When you set a boundary, okay, on what you will take in and how much another person's situation is going to affect your mood and your emotions, this does not mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that you love the person any less, but you worrying and being just as anxious as everyone else about this person's situation, that is not going to influence the person's healing. And I'm talking about in this situation, in this example, I'm talking about a person dealing with a dis-ease in their body, dealing with disharmony in their body. You can apply this to anything. Okay. You being worried and you being anxious is not going to help them change their habits. It's not going to force them to, or even help them to change their behaviors that will help them get well. It doesn't. So I had to tell this person that I had to explain that very thing. Me forcing them to do something, me forcing them to adjust their habits, their eating habits per se, or for example, that's not going to help them get well. That's not going to influence their healing. And you can say that in a short way. Me worrying, again, me being anxious, me projecting my anxiousness onto them. As a matter of fact, that resistance will even cause even more resistance in that person's body. So you can put a limit on how you're going to allow another person's emotions, regardless of where the emotions are coming from or what is being a catalyst to those emotions. You cannot take that on. Remember, because the full moon is even bringing your emotions to the surface. So you have to put a boundary on what you allow in. All right. So let me give you another example. Now, this example we can all relate to because this is dealing with the news. We can avoid the news all we want to. You trying to avoid the news is not going to help you avoid the news because it's constantly in your face. So now this example, like I said, it's more of a collective example. So in the news, we see, you hear things in tragic stories that happen all the time. So when you see the news of, let's say this tragic story that happened, the first thing you see is the family of the victims crying, yelling, screaming, inconsolable. Is that how you say that word? Yeah. Okay. So you can see that the pain of the tragic event, the train of their loss, the pain of their loss is evident. All right. But you don't need to use your energy thinking about that tragedy for the rest of the day. For beyond that moment when you saw that story, you do not need to carry those emotions with you. Now, I know that may sound cold, but that is how, it's one of the ways that you can set a boundary on what you allow in as far as emotion. Instead, what you can do, I'm still talking about that example, instead, you use that energy to celebrate your life, to celebrate the lives of those that you love. And so the reason I'm using that particular example is because many times, tragic losses happen, right? Because loss happens because people took too much on of someone else's emotion. Sometimes tragedy happens because an individual or individuals ignored their own emotions that were coming to the surface. They ignored what their own emotions were telling them. All right. So I know that I have driven this home for you guys, especially with those two examples. And so I want you to remember, if you don't remember anything else from this episode, is that your magic is in the elements. Start with the elements first if you don't know anything else to do. All right. And take time to become knowledgeable about your affinity toward working in spiritual, with different spiritual technologies, methodologies, right? The more that you know, the less uncomfortable you are with them, the less fear that you have toward them. Why am I saying that? Because when I walked away from religion, when I detached from religion, from the church, I had already had affinities toward certain things, toward spiritual practices, i.e., the full moon, i.e., the elements. But even after I was gone, decades later, from the church, from religion, I still carried a fear until I became knowledgeable. And really, I was becoming more knowledgeable of myself because that was inherent. That was why I had a natural affinity toward, for this example, toward the full moon, for the full moon, because that is a part of my spiritual technology. So, we're going to talk more about these things on Mondays, Magic Mondays, all right? And so what I want you to do is let me know what your takeaways are from this episode. And this episode, I know, was a little longer than your average episode. This probably could have been 2 episodes. But anyway, I want you to let me know what your takeaways are. And I also want to remind you, this is one of the things that I help people with my 24 session package of being completely liberated and being completely immersed in your sovereign identity, in your own divinity. It's for you to really get to a place. I take you through phases, and in each phase, you become more and more and more comfortable, and you become more and more and more knowledgeable of who you are as a sovereign being, of how you are to show up in this world, and how you relate to yourself, how you view yourself as a magical being. You become more and more comfortable with your own spiritual gifts. You become more and more comfortable with showing up as a spiritual being and being comfortable talking about how you practice your spirituality if you choose to share that with anybody. So, for support in that, I want you to go to unleashedalchemy.com. Information on the phases that I take you through in that 21st session package is on my website, all right? And if you are serious about working with me, I want you to send me an email, unleashedalchemy@gmail.com. Also, I have courses, individual courses that you can purchase that you will have lifetime access to, that are also very instrumental in helping you embrace who you are as a sovereign being. I also have ebooks, all right, that again are very instrumental in helping you embrace who you are as a sovereign being. Now, I want you to be on the lookout because I have physical products coming. All right. They are coming soon. So be on the lookout for that because I will be announcing that in the next few episodes. All right. So be magical and be sovereign.